Hey guys, it's Courtney and welcome to day number 1 of the beginner series. Now, I know I did a poll on my channel a few weeks ago asking what you guys want to see, and a majority of you wanted to see a coloring series, which we will have beginning next week. But for those of you who are beginners, and I know that a lot of my viewers, these videos this week may not really pertain to you because you guys aren't necessarily beginners. However, when I first started card making, there wasn't a whole lot of YouTube channels, and I had to kind of experiment and learn as I go, and I made a lot of mistakes that cost me a lot of money in the long run. So hopefully any of you who are beginners and just starting card making or paper crafting, these videos will help a little bit and kind of lead into the coloring series that will begin next week. So today we're going to be talking about paper and adhesives. So just the basics. We're not going to go over every single kind of cardstock and paper out there. We're not going to go over every single kind of adhesive, but these are the basics. These are maybe something that you may want to add to your stash to kind of avoid spending unnecessary money in the long run. So for paper, which is basically what you need for card making, is white cardstock, craft cardstock, watercolor cardstock, and the list goes on from there. What I like to use for my everyday white cardstock is Neenah Solar White 80-pound classic crest cardstock, which I will link below. I don't have a package because I pre-cut mine all to an A2 size card and kind of just leave the rest of the stack outside of its packaging. But I will leave a link below. It's not the cheapest cardstock in the world, but it's also not the most expensive. You can use your alcohol markers on it. It's beautiful for ink blending, stamping. It's kind of a go-to cardstock for everything, or for almost everything, I should say. So I will leave a link to that below. You can get a whole ream of it, which is 250 sheets, for around $35, and it'll last you a very, very long time. Now, if you want to do things other than just stamping, other than coloring with markers, you may want to look into watercolor techniques. And the two that I find the cheapest and get the best results for what I do is just watercolor paper. You don't want to go too cheap with this. So go with a name brand. I like to use the Canson watercolor paper. It's fairly inexpensive, and you can even grab it at a craft store or an art store. They can get pretty pricey if you go to like Arches watercolor paper. And depending on your skill level, depending on the results that you're looking for, you may want to kind of increase your budget for watercolor paper. But for what I do, backgrounds and simple watercolor techniques, the Canson watercolor paper is my favorite. Also, the Bristol smooth cardstock is great for water techniques, backgrounds. It doesn't take quite as much water as the regular watercolor paper, but it is what it says it is. It's smooth. It's very, very smooth. So it is also great for ink blending, stamping. You may not want to color on it with markers, but you can certainly use watercolor pens, things like that. Now for pencil techniques, as far as colored pencils, I like to use the Strathmore toned gray, and I know they have other colors as well, or I like to use a craft cardstock, or my favorite is the Neenah Desert Storm. This is a little bit smoother, but actually takes colored pencils pretty well, and it's also great for stamping, and you can color on it with alcohol markers. You can pretty much use this for everything as well. Obviously it's not white, but I like this. I keep a whole stack of this as well in my craft room. So again, I will link everything below. Now, as far as colored cardstock goes, me personally, I don't really buy colored cardstock. I'll use what comes in card kits that I purchase, but for the most part, I don't really buy colored cardstock. However, I did in the beginning, and I bought a whole lot of it in the beginning. I used to go to Michael's and just buy stacks and packages and packages and packages of every color that they had. Now, the thing you want to keep in mind is that the cardstock that you typically get at craft stores, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, places like that, are not going to be very thick. They're typically 65 pound. And what I like to use for layering is 80 pound. What I like to use for card bases is 110 or 120 pound. So you want to kind of take a look at the thickness. If you are looking to make card bases, do not get this 65 pound cardstock. You'll be very disappointed. It is inexpensive. You can really stock up on colored cardstock. Just keep in mind that it is going to be very thin. Now, what I use for card bases is the Bright White Smooth cardstock. It's by Mohawk, which is actually a local company to me. They produce this paper and I love it. It's not really great for techniques, but it's fairly inexpensive. It's super thick and it's very, very smooth, very easy to score, very easy to make into card bases yourself. Of course, you can buy card bases, but again, that is something that costs a little bit more than just making it yourself. Typically, I pop on a movie, bring my scoreboard, bring my paper trimmer, and make about 1,000 card bases at a time in front of the TV at night. So it doesn't really take that long. I kind of occupy myself with a movie or TV while I do it and save a bunch of money. So once again, I will link this below. It's a lot less expensive than most of the heavyweight cardstocks out there and a very, very, very good quality. So let's talk about card sizes, the typical card sizes. The most common size that you'll see in the card making world is an A2 size card, which is going to be 5.5 by 4.25. And the reason why I think this is so popular is because we can get 2 card bases from each sheet of paper or 4 card panels. So we're going to make a card base, and I'm going to take my 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock, and I'm going to pop it in my scoreboard, and I am going to score it in half. Now you can do this either way. You can do it the vertical or actually that's the horizontal, or you can do it vertically. So if you're doing it vertically, you're going to score at 4.25. If you're doing it horizontally, you're going to score at 5.5. So I'm just going to run my scoring tool here. And then once I have that score line, you are going to, pardon the cat hair, you are going to fold it where it's indented in. So pretty much you're going to fold it the opposite of what you think you're going to fold it. You're not going to fold it against the indent. You're going to fold it right on it. Then you can take a bone folder. You can even take a spoon from your kitchen to get that really nice crease. Then I can take out my paper trimmer and I'm going to cut this in half. So remember, we scored it at 5.5, so I'm going to cut this at 4.25. And now I have 2 top folding A2 size cards, 1 sheet of paper. Now another common size is a 5 by 7. So you're only going to get 1 of those out of 1 sheet of paper. But again, you're going to score it either at the 5 or the 7 and then cut off the opposite. So if you score it at 7, you're going to cut at 5. If you score it at 7, you're going to, or if you score it at 5, you're going to cut it at 7. So another common size that we see now is the slimline card, which a slimline card fits in a standard letter envelope, and they are typically 8.5 by 3.5. However, sometimes they're a little bit larger than that, depending on who makes them. So there's really no standard size to it. But typically, if you buy coordinating die cuts for it, you'll find that it is 8.5 by 3.5. So what we need to do is we're only going to get 1 from this sheet, but we want to score it at 3.5. So this is 11 inches right now. So we need to take 4 inches off of this to make it 7, because 3.5 times 2 is 7. So I'm going to take off 4 inches from this. And now we have 7 by 8.5. 7 by 8.5, and we're going to score it at 3.5. And once again, we're gonna fold it with that indent out. So the crease will be where the indent goes in. Once again, take my bone folder or a spoon. And now we have our slimline card. So those are the 3 most common sizes that you'll see in card making. You can always you can always go with different sizes. You can make a square card, but just keep in mind that the length of it needs to be double what the size is. The length is always going to be the same here, but this always needs to be doubled, and you're going to score right in the center. Okay, so let's talk adhesives. There are hundreds of different kinds of adhesives out there. So I'm just going to run through the basics. So I think what we probably all started with, if you guys have been crafting at all for a while, is a tape runner. I have the ATG huge Scotch tape runner. Here's the refills for it. Pretty inexpensive. It's kind of a pain to refill, but it works great. It's super, super strong. There's also small tape runners that you can get. They are convenient, but they can be pricey because they're not going to make a whole lot of cards with it because they're very small, and they tend to be the more pricey. If you're making a lot of cards or a lot of projects, I wouldn't necessarily go with that for a lot of projects because you're going to spend more on adhesive than anything else in your project. But this is a cheap alternative. You kind of have to spend a little bit to get going with it, but this will last you forever. I've had this for probably 10 years. And the refills, you get 2 rolls, and it's really not too bad. I don't know the exact price, but I'll find it and link it below. And it'll last you a while. It's kind of a pain, but it'll last you a while. Now there's also double-sided tape that comes on a roll, which mine's a little bit wonky. But basically it's very strong. You can get it in all different lengths or all different thicknesses, I should say. But you just take it off like tape. You pop it on your cardstock, and it's tearable, which is what I like because I don't have to bring out my scissors all the time. And you kind of just peel off the backing, and it becomes super, super sticky. This is probably your stickiest double-sided adhesive. It's this is score tape, but you can get it through scrapbook.com. Makes something very, very similar, and you can even get full sheets of this, so you can use it in your die cutting machine. Now we also have foam tape. Tons of different kinds of foam tape as well. I use this Fasten from, I get mine on Amazon because it's super cheap and it lasts me a really long time. And all foam tape really is exactly what it says it is. It's double-sided adhesive, and it's gonna go right on just like that score tape did with the backing. You just pop it on your project and peel off the backing, and you have stickiness on both sides. But the difference with this is it's going to add dimension. So you can use this for an entire panel. You can use this for shaker cards. You can use this if you just want to pop up an image or a sentiment, and it will just add a little bit of dimension to your card. Finally, we have wet glue, and there are so many different brands of this. So it's kind of just going to be your personal preference. I always like to keep the medium matte in my craft room. This is super strong. It does not dry very quickly, but it does dry matte, and it dries clear. So if you have any that kind of squishes out, you won't be able to see it, and it is super strong. So I always keep this on hand. I don't reach for it often, but I always keep a little bottle of it on hand. The Glossy Accents is something that you can use as an adhesive. I personally don't unless I am using it for sequins, but I typically use it as an embellishment on my cards, but it is also a glue. So if you have this in your stash, you don't have any wet glue, you can reach for this to glue things together. And finally, my favorite, because it's cheap and it works great and I just love it. And this is something that I've been using for many, many years. And once I switched over to this, I never switched back. This is the Tombow Mono Liquid Multi Glue, and it dries fairly quickly. Gives you a couple of seconds to kind of shift things around to make sure everything's lined up, but it becomes permanent within probably about 30 seconds. And also, it becomes repositionable. So you can use this to glue paper to paper, and it's going to become permanent. So if I wanted to glue these two pieces together while the glue is still wet, I'm going to line those up, wait a couple of seconds, and it becomes permanent. Now, if I wanted to use this as a repositionable adhesive for masking or maybe sticking something just temporarily to a surface, I can squirt a little bit out of the bottle, kind of rub that with my finger a little bit, and it is white when it comes out of the bottle and dries clear. So once it is dry, and I have a couple of seconds to get that to dry a little bit, I can take another piece of cardstock here and just stick that down. Now it is dry because it dries fairly quickly, and it becomes repositionable. So I can easily put this down temporarily, but I can also take it right off without damaging any of my cardstock. So that is definitely my favorite. It's only probably about $4 or $5 a bottle, and a little goes a long way. So this is definitely my favorite. I always buy a case of it at a time. It lasts me a long time, probably about a year, but I never ever want to run out. So definitely my favorite adhesive. So that is the basics for paper and adhesive for your card making. Feel free to kind of experiment. Just don't go crazy, and every time something new and exciting comes out, don't feel like you need to buy it. Kind of work up your stash gradually and find what you love and kind of stick to that for as long as you possibly can. So I will be back tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the basics and the beginner's guide to stamps and inks. So I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Bye.